is happening to me. I found the greatest love of all inside of me. The greatest love of all. It's easy to achieve. Learning to love yourself, it is the greatest love of all. And if by chance that special place that you've been dreaming of leads you to a lonely place, find your strength in love.
I'd like to hear him sing sometime. It's so good to see everyone. In recent weeks, on this very spot, ministers have spent a great deal of time touching upon the socio-political struggles that are raging in our nation, with the recent court rulings, the constant mass shootings, the racial animus among our citizens, the lasting effects of COVID, war and conflict across the globe, and so on. Many of us are having visceral reactions to the seemingly endless cycles of chaos and strife. Reverend Barbara, my colleague here, preached last Sunday about the feelings that many of us might be experiencing, especially after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. The words she used in her sermon last week were disheartened, discouraged, concerned, convinced, vindicated with a question mark, shocked, ashamed, ambivalent, anxious, overwhelmed, exhausted, relieved with a question mark, uncertain even of each other, afraid even of each other, silenced, isolated, and stressed. Did you notice any positive feeling words in that list? And anger was not on that list. However, it is by far what many people, me included, have been feeling the most. And there's a lot in our lives and in the world for us to be angry about. I can tell you that I've never been more angrier with some of our local and national leaders and politicians, especially the ones who have manipulated, misused, and abused the systems and the truth to get what they want, to oppress others, and exploit our differences in efforts to further divide us. I'll be honest with you. I've been wanting to fight some people. And not just fight, I want to fight dirty. I recall when Michelle Obama said that when they go low, we go high. I say, bump that. Many of us feel that we should get down dirty like the rest of them. I've been disappointed with those who are most aligned with the values that I support, who sometimes appear not to fight as hard and dirty as those who oppose the values that you and I espouse. And anger can be a strong motivator. Like many of you, I haven't felt this much fight in me for a long time. I haven't felt this level of resistance as I do now. I don't ever recall being this motivated to effect change as I do right now. But I'm reminded of Dr. King's nonviolent movement. As I shared a couple of weeks ago, how proponents of civil rights often faced extreme violence. And many around Dr. King thought that he should advocate for his followers to respond in kind, eye for eye, sword for sword. But Dr. King knew that by resorting to violence, they, and by extension, we, would become just like them. And the moral arc would be weakened because justice cannot strive in a, by whatever means necessary, environment. We cannot use injustice to establish justice. We cannot employ lies in our endeavors to establish truth. There is a standard by which we live, move, and have our being. In this movement, we're guided by our 7 principles and 6 sources. To name a few, we have the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equality, and compassion in human relations, a free and responsible truth, search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The goal of the world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Respect for the independent web of all existence of which we are a part. And then the sources that guide us, the direct experiences of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. Words and deeds of prophetic people which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Wisdom from the world's religions which inspires us to our ethical and spiritual life. And it goes so on and so on. And then we have our internal value system. No doubt for many of us consists of integrity, faithfulness, authenticity, and so on. But much is before us. Many difficulties and blessings. And we are feeling so much right now. Just right now, if you were just to examine your body, what is it that you're feeling? I can imagine that you're feeling all kinds of emotions. So I feel that it is time that we refocus some of that energy towards the care of our own heart. And as Shannon was talking about in self-care, I feel that self-care starts with us assessing the states of our states of being, recognizing with a degree of acceptance our anger, our pain, and whatever it is that has wounded us. So now that we have talked about anger, let's talk about love. Someone said anger is a stage of grief, and grief is but love with no place to go. So we really do need to have a conversation about love, and it just so happens to be in the title of my sermon, so. But how dare I come with this cheesy, overrated word as the proposition in the title of my sermon? I can imagine the people saw that title. He's going to talk about greater love, and they decided to skip the service today. And love was not mentioned in Reverend Barbara's list of emotions. So how does love connect with the feelings and emotions that so many of us feel right now? And where does the concept of no greater love, where does it fit in this seemingly era of rage and chaos? This community has its own covenant And love is twice mentioned in it. We just recited it at the start of the service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And so, am I here today to send the message that all we need is love? That love is the answer to all the world's problems? We know how that song goes. And to think of it in these terms makes me want to cringe, because I've heard it before. And I'm sure some of you share these sentiments. The concept of love is so often used, abused, and so loosely thrown about that when we do hear it in times of crisis or difficulty, it often elicits a neck bend or an eye roll. I'm really good at that. You can ask Dimitri that. There he goes again, talking about how love can save us. We have witnessed the abuse of love so often that we can no longer fully trust its application or its power. But perhaps there is still something salvific about the notion of love, and perhaps we shouldn't abandon it altogether. The greatest love phrase brings to mind those who have been called to give the ultimate sacrifice, their lives for some great cause. And such is often attributed to the sacrifices of our military personnel, and we honor them this day. As such is the greatest manifestation of love. Jesus said it plainly that no greater love has one who gives his life for another. The chorus of the Whitney Houston song says, because the greatest love of all is happening to me. I found the greatest love of all inside of me. The greatest love of all is easy to achieve. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. And I don't know about that. I don't know about love being easy, or loving yourself being easy to achieve. What type of love are we talking about being easy? I don't know of any easy love. But perhaps there is still something to be said. Civil rights leader and founder of the Revolutionary Love Project, Valerie Carr, described what she calls revolutionary love as the kind of love that helps us to see no stranger. It is a type of love where we choose to labor for others, our opponents, and ourselves. Now, she said opponents, not enemies, because enemies is a static term where no one can ever change the narrative. But opponents is something you can contend with. She asserts it's a labor of love that is sweet, fierce, bloody, imperfect, and life-giving. And it's a choice that we have to make over and over and over again. But it begins with, she says, it begins with wonder. Wonder about another's story. Wonder about a person's joy and sorrows. Wonder about the world in ways we haven't thought of. Wonder about ourselves in ways that we haven't seen. In ways that help us to reimagine our lives. Through this wonder, we can learn enough about another person that we can then know how to care for them. We can learn enough about ourselves to discover new pathways to make the world a better place. New pathways to heal us and to keep us, to make us whole. In this model, we can even tend to the wounds of our opponents. And mirroring Dr. Kristen Neff in her book titled Self-Companion, The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself, asserts it is the recognition of our common humanity and our interconnectedness to others, as opposed to our being isolated and alone in our suffering, that leads to compassion for ourselves and for others. Valerie Carr goes on to say, when a critical mass of people come together to wonder about one another, grieve with one another, and fight with and for another. We begin to build the solidarity needed for collective liberation and transformation, a solidarity rooted in love. Love indeed can save us. And while we have all heard this before, what I noticed something while studying, that what has been described here could very well be what we call a love beyond belief. This community has the bold-faced audacity to aspire to a love beyond belief. As people of faith and conscience, we have made the phrase love beyond belief a central tenet of our religious culture and expression. So it's not just any type of love, but a love so radical and transformative that it transcends belief. But go with me for a little bit, because what this phrase implies is that we, our church, either possesses or aspires to a type of love that supersedes any belief that one might hold. It says, we love you beyond whatever your story is. It does not imply that we affirm or validate your belief. It implies that we will love you regardless of your belief. Meaning we will love the hell out of you. Yeah, come on. And this is what we have bound ourselves to. Either it's real for us or it's just a cute cliche that makes us feel good about the people we think we are. Shall I say that again? Yeah. Either it's real for us or it's just a cute cliche that makes us feel good about the people we think we are. Oh, y'all gave me so much to work with today. What would make such a claim difficult, if not impossible, if we don't know how to do it? So how do we do it? No doubt, we must first acknowledge that we are deeply wounded folks, just like the rest of the world. According to Kristen Neff, self-compassion has three primary components. The first being mindful not to ignore our own pain by having a balanced awareness that we are all hurting, wounded, and that we are all in need of wholeness. The second is being kind to yourself. Recognize that when we do fall short of our ideals, and we will fall short, instead of resorting to self-criticism or self-hatred or frustration that we somehow failed in upholding our values, we show ourselves grace. Such is the foundation of self-care. So today we practice self-care by showing ourselves grace. Grace for being angry. Grace for being frustrated. And whatever else we're feeling that's unsupported by our values. See, we get depressed because we know what our values are. We know what we stand for. And so sometimes we lose it. And again, all due respect to Whitney, we are still learning how to love ourselves. And it hasn't been easy now for some narcissists. It might not be a problem, but for the rest of us, I've come to the understanding that what makes it difficult for a person to express love outwardly may be because they don't know how to express it inwardly. It stems from the thought that one cannot completely love another if they don't know how to love themselves. How are you going to like me when you don't even like you? And if people don't treat themselves good, it's likely they won't treat you good. This is what we're seeing in the nation. It kind of reminds me of the outdated golden rule. Doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. I said, no. People abuse themselves. And if they do unto you like they do unto themselves, if they do to me like they do to themselves, we might be in trouble. That's why I believe in the platinum rule. Do unto me as I choose to be done unto. Treat me as I want to be treated. Serve me as I want to be served. Love me as I want to be loved. I believe we are witnessing this in our land. Good people doing ugly things. People who say they love doing unlovable things. I struggle loving myself. I like myself, but I struggle loving myself. I think a great deal of the abuse in our world is directly linked to how people think and feel about themselves. In order to love others beyond belief, let me get back to that. We must first learn to love ourselves beyond what we believe to be true about ourselves. Sometimes we buy into the myth. Self-care has been able to love ourselves beyond whatever we may be feeling in the moment. Loving ourselves beyond what some people have said about us and we maybe believe. We are not what we feel. We are not what people say. We must have compassion for ourselves and affirm our own value and worthiness. And then we can extend this compassion to others. Valerie Costa's Revolution of Love compels us to show compassion to even our opponents by tending to their wounds. Now, I had to sit with this one for a little bit. Tending wounds when I really want to cause some wounds. But we're a nonviolent people. But lately I have been thinking, so showing grace, that I even had the thought, and I know some of you've had it too. Be acting sanctified if you want to, but I know you do. This is where it takes a greater love. By tending to another's wounds could simply be by listening to their stories. It may be actively listening to their political points of view or theology. And it may be painful to listen to someone's story that invalidates your own. But listening, we must, because the potential for rewards can be great. We need to have dialogue. We have to have dialogue if we are to survive as a country. And we don't have to affirm or validate as true what they are feeling, but merely allowing them to be heard. To see no stranger or enemy is to be in a place where we can wonder about anyone. Because simple curiosity about another could go a long way in regard to our communal healing. But let me be clear, I'm not asking us to tend to people who would harm us or those who hate us because of who we are and who we love and what we believe in. It would be hard to wonder about people who want to harm us, who have a knife or a gun pointed at us. And there are some of these people in society that fits this description. We mustn't submit ourselves to them. As I would not encourage you to tend to a partner in an abusive relationship. You mustn't allow yourself to be abused. We cannot be abused, allow ourselves to be abused. But we can keep the wonder. But wonder is pointless when it's about our survival. We need only to acknowledge their humanity, even when their humanity, when they refuse to acknowledge our humanity. When we honor the humanity of those who are not easy to love, we honor ourselves and the core values that are foundational to our lives. And if we are to claim a love beyond belief, we must ask ourselves, what does it mean? How does it manifest in our lives? You can ask this question before you leave this place. What does love beyond belief mean to me? And how is it manifested in my life? Who are the recipients of such great love? When we say love beyond belief, are we then to believe that it also means that it's love beyond politics? Love beyond race, beyond wealth, and so on. A few years ago, while working as a chaplain at the VA in Durham, North Carolina, I received a call from a gentleman who lived in Virginia. His brother was at the VA there, and where I worked, he had just been given dire news concerning his health. The person on the call was distraught and asked if I would visit his ailing brother. I told him that I would. I found out what floor the caller's brother was on, and I went directly to his room. When I arrived, he was sitting in a wheelchair, getting ready to go out for additional testing. When I introduced myself as the chaplain, his wife burst into tears saying, "I don't want him to die. I don't want him to die." He had been told that it was likely that nothing else could be done for him. The veteran looked up at me from that wheelchair, directly in my eyes, and he asked if I could get a word through to the man upstairs. I could see the fear and the desperation in his face. In that moment, I recognized that to him, I represented the only advocate between him dying and him living, his life and his death. I recall feeling a sense of overwhelming compassion for this man and his family. Over the next 3 weeks, I would visit this man and his family in intensive care. We talked about many things pertaining to his life, and even though care providers are discouraged from sharing much of their own lives with patients, it was appropriate on several instances during our time together for me to do so. I got to know this man and his family. I learned that he was a diehard Trump fan, an avid Fox News watcher. I was there in his room as he talked about his conservative values, Fox News personalities, and his love for Trump. He was a polar opposite of me in every way, politically, religious, and socially. But during this time, my race, religion, and political perspective didn't mean all that much to him, nor did his to me. They were not a point of contention or division. We connected around his need and my availability and willingness to put my differences aside to care for this man and his family. Although my beliefs about God, prayer, and faith had significantly changed throughout the years, I summoned those experiences from my past. And if I have ever prayed in my life, I fervently prayed for this man with everything that I had. I tapped into a faith that I have known in years past in the hopes that the God of our own understandings would grant him his desire to live. I wanted it so much for him. It was almost palpable as I prayed and sought the divine for a miracle on his behalf. This gentleman would live for another 3 weeks. And after his death, the veteran's family reached out to my chief and requested that I lead the memorial service. I was honored. When I arrived at the memorial, I was introduced to the veteran's extended family as their pastor. It was such a term of endearment. I knew exactly what it meant to them in that moment. I stood in this man's home, surrounded by his all-white family, and feeling perfectly safe and valued. None of our differences mattered in that moment. I was just a public servant to this family. No, I wasn't just a public servant to this family. I wasn't just a chaplain. It felt like I was a close friend. Not only was his family blessed by what I shared of myself, this experience changed my life as well. I will never forget the experience. The veteran's eyes looking at me, I still see them today, reaching into my heart. I will always recall our conversations and him asking me to be with him through this crisis. I will always remember the kindness his family showed to me during the memorial. Our shared humanity is what prevailed, which was what was most important. And here's the kicker. I always had the capacity to show compassion towards him. You always have the compassion to show toward others. I told him, I shared with him, I gave him as he wanted to be held. I held him as he desired to be held. And in doing so, I didn't go against my core beliefs or core values, but I was certainly challenged in my narrative in the narrative that I had written about him when I first met him. I could have told him that there was no man upstairs, no benevolent being in heavenly domains. I could have told him that I no longer believed in divine healing. But I had set that all aside to connect to his story. In essence, to be a part of his story. And he a part of mine. And now you too are connected to this story. In that moment, it didn't matter what denomination I was a part of. It didn't matter about my agnosticism. He needed someone who would companion him. And I was there. I'm running out of time. And this is what it will take, getting through and going beyond our discomfort and distrust to get to know someone's story, to seek to understand them through it, and then to explore what connects you with them and vice versa. But more importantly, to see their humanity, despite their sometimes inhumane behavior. But ultimately is to learn to actually love someone beyond belief. It is well in our capacity to do so, and that's what each of us have vowed to do. And I'm going to finish there. Indeed, we are called to be in awe and wonder of each other and the world around us. But most of all, we are called to look in reverence at the wonder that we carry within, that we may be able to share it without. May it be so. Amen. Yes.